You know when. Go ahead. Good evening. Welcome to the Bethel Local Schools Board of Education special meeting in regards to our facilities committee. The date is Monday, January 11th, 2021 at 6:00 p.m. Call to order will be at 6:02 p.m. Ms. Reese, can you please call the roll?
Rick Gilbert.
Here.
Justin Firks.
Present.
Brandon Henry.
Present.
Chris Mills.
Chris and Caleb emailed, they will not be able to make it tonight.
Okay, I saw Kenny's. Danny Elam.
Yeah, here.
Lori Sebastian.
Here.
Julie Reese here. And Caleb Sedanote.
Item number 3, do we have any additions to the agenda if needed? Okay, number 4, communications, meetings, and announcements. Okay, item number 5, items for discussion, subcommittee reports. This time, I will turn it over to representatives from Garmin Miller. Laura, if you wanted to take stage, she's going to walk through us a little bit tonight. Letter A in regards to some reports and status updates on the rough draft of the site plan, the latest educational visioning meeting that was held with our staff and members of the board and administration, a general overall project update, and then also overview of the lead Echo Charette meeting. And anything else that Laura wants to talk about as well. Thank you for being here tonight, Laura.
Thank you.
The floor is yours.
All right, can you see my screen?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay, so giving an update from last month, we did have a mechanical system selection meeting. That went very well. This month, we've had 2 meetings already. We had a technology system discussion. We have another follow-up meeting tomorrow as well. We had an Eco Charette meeting as well last week. So for OFCC, they require that we meet LEED Silver. To get there, you need 50 points. So we ended the meeting with trying to decide, is it a credit that yes, we think that we can attain, or no, absolutely not. And if not, you know, is it in the maybe column? It's something that we're going to have to do more research, look into a little further, and then make a decision. At the meeting, we had 49 in the yes column. And then we had 30 points credits in the maybe column. So those are ones that we're going to go back through and take a look at and see which one of those that we can move over, because we do need to meet the 50 points. So we'll be continuing to update that as the project moves on. And then we're working towards schematic design for the K-5 in the stadium as well. Tonight, we wanted to also show you the site development, where we are so far. And I've got Kellen Mesher and Kathy Trejo with our office as well to help present these slides.
Hello, this is Kellen talking. So first off, this site analysis is existing conditions of the way the site is now. A couple things to note is that tree line, there's wetlands in it that we've got to try to avoid, and then a couple things that we call linear erosional features. Chose not to call them streams to not bring attention to it, but they're items that we should try to avoid if we can. Couple other items to note, existing circulation is shown, how parents drop off, where visitors and staff come in at the existing school, where high schoolers park, and the bus circulation. One of the big items to note is that existing parking lot where the high schoolers park has 242 parking spaces, which is key for the football stadium. It adds about half of the amount of parking we need for that. Per code, we need about 500 parking spaces for the stadium. A couple other things to note is the existing detention basin. And then the low point of the site is along 201, kind of where the existing detention basin is now. And that's why where our proposed detention basin is going to have to go to. Just makes sense for to be at the low spot and be on the other side of the tree line. Couple other things to note. Broad is kind of a narrow road. And if we were to bring in any drive off there, it would require some major road widening, which is a high dollar value. So as you'll see in the next slide, we're going to try to avoid that at all costs. Per our traffic engineers at choice one, it's just, it's going to be a big budget number. I did talk to them about possibly bringing in a bus drive. They said it was possible, but it would still require some improvements. And then one other thing to note, in talking to the civil engineer, he was saying that 968 to 970 would be the optimal range for the finished floor elevation of the new building. The site slopes from west to east, so the east is the low end. So yeah, where the cursor is, that's where the optimal range is for the building elevation. This is key because if we slid it further down east, it would require a lot more fill, which is, again, another high dollar value. One thing we also have to keep in mind is the depth to bedrock. So we'll have to look at that once we get the soils report and go from there. So I think those are the highlights on this slide. So you can move on to the next one, Laura.
Sorry, there's a lag.
Well, it's all good.
How about now?
Yep, I see it. So kind of taking some of these things into account that I talked about in the last slide. You can see we placed the stadium kind of close to the existing parking lot, that 242 parking space parking lot. But we didn't want to place it so far to the south that it was away from the new parking we were going to be installing. So we kind of wanted it centrally located between those parking lots. One item to note, and we discussed this in a previous meeting, is kind of where the concession building and main entry would come into the stadium. And we decided on the south side and then the southeast side where people would enter, because that's where most of the people are going to be parking in that parking lot. I've got a dash line shown in that existing parking lot to show that, whether parking lot could expand now or in the future. You could add another 150, 200 spots and get about to your 500 parking spaces you need. So it's something to think about, maybe now or in the future. Just keep that in mind. And then moving on to the high school or the new school placement. As you can see, we placed it in that optimal finished floor elevation range. So it's set back a couple hundred feet from 201. Not only does this help with costs, but it also helps with car stacking for parent drop-off. You got an internal drive that'll be feeding this drop-off. So it's coming off of 201, probably, I can't remember what, 700 or 800 feet off of the 201 and Broad intersection. And that additional drive will help with congestion at the existing school as well as the new school to give you more stacking space. So parents will drop off. That front lot will be for staff and visitor parking. We currently have 168 spaces in there. OSDM says right around 160 spaces is what we need. And then there were a couple of discussions on how we wanted to orient the bus lot, which is kind of on the west side of the new building. In looking at how the circulation works, we thought it was important to maybe bring a drive over from where the buses drop off on the west side of the existing school and bring a drive over to a bus lot to the elementary school. and then have them loop out that new drive we have coming off of 201. This will help with congestion at the existing school with the parent pickup there, as well as at the new school. One thing that the bus lot does allow is we can overstripe it for event parking, so we can get another 120 parking spaces for events, as well as this can be utilized for team buses and band buses and those type of things. We would have like a separate smaller entry for the players and band in the northeast corner of the stadium there. And then one thing to note in this scheme is I have kind of labels shown, like future baseball stadium, future softball stadium, future building, and those type of things. One thing to think about is, if a new building does get placed on this site, let's say 10, 15 years from now, or whatever the time frame is, do we want to think about this bus lot being shared between those two schools and maybe oriented a better way, or that facilitates that? So we look, the next slide shows this new orientation. And really, the only thing that changes is the orientation of the bus lot. One of the big things in the visioning meeting we had in December was that some of the staff wanted the students to be able to, the parking spaces to be closer, so the students that didn't have as far to walk. So you can see if the bus is parked on the way west end of this lot, that student would have, a couple hundred feet to walk to get into the building. But what this orientation does is you can see how close it might be to a potential future building. So this might be a cost saver in the future if you were to put a building on this site, another building on this site. You could utilize that bus lot as bus parking for the new school, as well as what will be this elementary school. Another thing this does is it brings the parking lot closer to the stadium for event parking. Pretty much everything else is the same. One other thing to note, this scheme does allow more playground space in the immediate area close to the building. And one of the other things we discussed was maybe utilizing this bus lot as asphalt play area. So it'll be multi-purpose bus lot, event parking, and then we can use it as for play for recess. And we would gate this off during the day so people couldn't access it while recess was going on. Yeah, those are pretty much the highlights. Questions, comments?
Sorry. Helen, I like the option 2, but I don't understand why there's an intersection with the 2 lanes there. You know what I'm saying? Yes, right there.
Section right here.
Yes. Why not, from the old building, why not bring it more directly to your west end of the parking lot?
You're saying like extending this?
No. From the old building, bring it across the creek and more directly toward the entrance, the west end entrance of the parking, of that bus parking lot, so that it's more of a loop rather than an intersection.
I'm not sure I'm following what you're saying.
Run it up closer to the football field? The stadium?
Yes, run it up closer to the football field.
This drive here?
Yes, yes.
Ah,
I might point
well,
out that
couple-
when they exit, it is technically a loop. So if you follow how a bus travels into that lot, they enter on the west end and they exit on the east. So it's 6 of one, half dozen of the other. We could definitely look at it, but they are in this scheme, once they exit on the east end, they're looping back to the high school directly. So it's either a direct route on your way there or a direct route on your way back.
Okay. I
Plus
was
the
just
services,
sorry.
the services are back there too, and it allows access to those services.
I think you might need to just explore that and show who's, and all the different circulation patterns in a little bit more detailed manner in the future.
All right. Thank you.
So really, we were wanting to try and get a direction from you. I know that from the educational visioning session, this orientation for the bus lot was something that the visioning session, the teachers and staff wanted. So that way the students come out the west side of the building and they're able to go directly to their buses without the teachers walking them all the way out. Wanted that we didn't have a site plan discussion with the football group, but then we wanted to, let you know of all of your options. We're not leaning one way or the other necessarily. But then this one gets closer to the stadium a little bit. Like Helen said, you can add on to this bus lot for a potential future building. Of course, you can do that with the other option as well and add on to the bus lot for your future building. If you're going to have more buses possibly as well with the more students, you may have to add on to it anyways. So just trying to get a direction from you on which one of these site plans that we should start pursuing further.
Damon, like I do as well, in option 2, he thought that where the buses pull up, the kids can go right in your entrance, you know what I mean, the buses, so I think he's talking, I think it's better.
I like this option 2 also because with the other one, your playground is more restricted. You have way more ground to work with here in terms of your playground with this one. I guess teachers are thinking when it's bad weather, having to walk that distance from a bus.
Yeah, that was their concern. We talked about looking at different orientations for the bus lot. Another thing this option 2 does is it kind of opens up your view. You're not looking over a whole parking lot. And as was mentioned, it gives you more room for a playground and more lawn area and just different things.
What does option 1 look like for extending the bus parking lot? Yeah, you're kind of trapped.
Not necessarily, because this is just lawn outdoor learning area. It just extends. It would be a little further away from a future building if you were to put something up here.
Right. So you'd have to do 2 rows of buses.
Your future building may just have its own bus lot in this scheme instead of a shared space, because there wouldn't be enough space in this one anyway. So you'd either expand one or build a second.
Which would be more expensive, more asphalt.
Looking at the second one, wouldn't the kindergarten, first and second graders have a closer distance to the buses since they're kind of on that south end?
Well, the from the facility meeting, we had the art and music over towards the right-hand side of the gymnasium. And it was asked to move that first through second or K1, 2 over to closer to those. So that right-hand side, the north side would actually be your K1, 2.
Okay. Okay.
So the building floor plan will change a little.
Laura, I thought that it was being swapped because the original drawing showed the bus lot on that north end. I thought that was the reason in the educational visioning, the teachers talked about swapping and putting the K through 2 on the north end because the bus lot was on that end in that drawing as well.
I'll have to go back through and look at minutes. I don't remember that. I just remember it being, they wanted it closer to the art and music.
Do any of the other facility committee members have comments in regards to option 1 or 2?
I have an overall comment. I'm sure that I get not too liked for this, but I thought we were going to see options that showed it in different places. I'm not really prepared to make a decision. And this isn't even the drawing we were sent to review. So I can't even, I'm not prepared to make a 50-year decision today. That would be my take. I would like to see more plans of if we have a separate building in the future, how it would work, where it would go, where it could go, what the options are. It's not a separate building.
So, so this is the plan that we brought to the educational visioning session, this exact same one, where we talked about the optimal building elevation range and explained that. And so that from that, trying to save you the most cost for this project, that's why we were looking at that location for this building. We are trying to set you up for success in the future and showing how you can bring drives into the building. And then, so this gray line here is showing how you could potentially add on a drive in the future to connect it to whatever happens on that far west side of the project. But
I'm sorry, I was
designing, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was under the impression that we were going to have some community forum style things where some options will be presented. And we had some meetings where we talked about different placements and some concerns came up that, I mean, maybe they're not valid or maybe this is the choice, but one of them was having the elementary kids too close to 201. They would be on a highway. We have the opportunity to not have them there. And the visual of having, you know, if we build a separate high school, now it's in back of the elementary along Ag and Broad. I mean, there hasn't been a whole lot of discussion since those meetings. And it seems like this is just it.
So Julie, I'm going to jump in just a minute, Laura.
Thank you.
The reason we put the elementary to the front because it was cost prohibitive, both from a water and sewer and a roadway standpoint to push it farther back on Ag and Broad. Widening Ag and Broad was going to be very costly. That's all I have to say. Go ahead, Laura.
Well, when you say cost prohibitive, and it could be, Lori, but we haven't seen those numbers. We haven't had the discussion. Another thing was people like the building at an angle to the corner. So if nothing, I mean, that it seems like the work that was done and the comments that were made and concerns or questions that were raised have not been considered. And we have not had a community forum to involve the community. Not disagreeing with you, Lori, it could be completely cost prohibitive.
It was discussed at a facilities meeting because we had asked that, or maybe it was a educational visioning meeting, but one of those meetings, we do not have the funds to widen Ag and Broad and to do anything farther back. And the water and sewer running it clear to the back was going to be cost prohibitive.
I remember the water and sewer being run question. And so it was dismissed to put the school in the back. at this time.
My thoughts on that is that you have this land available right here. And it's at this point, with the information that we know about this site, there's nothing telling us that we should absolutely avoid where we are currently showing the school building. The further we push it to the west, like you said, all of the utilities are just going to get more expensive. So it would not be our recommendation to look at putting this building on like maybe the west side of the stadium. At this time, we would not recommend that.
Laura, in the future, will it then be less expensive to run, to see where it says potential future building? Will it then be less expensive to run water and sewer to that area if the elementary school is where you have it located?
Well, you already have them taken this far. How about that?
Yeah,
So
you'll be
like,
halfway there.
If the size, if you plan for that potentially.
So Kellen, remind me, somewhere about when we take this across, there was going to be a sanitary pump station somewhere about here. Am I right?
Correct. And it's not all going to be pumped. Part of it's going to be pumped and part of it's going to be able to be gravity fed. And we're just going to have to figure out where that point is once we get further into design. But yeah, it's going to be a combo of the two. And we are going to pump.
Yeah, so we're going to try to get utilities to, towards this area. So
I thought one plus of moving it back was that even if the water and sewer costs more, and I know it will, I'm agreeing on that would help with the stadium costs because OCC would co-fund some of that water and sewer and it could be tapped into for the stadium. That was part of the discussion. I don't remember ruling it out, but
we are going to be tapping into.
Sorry, Laura, you kind of cut out there.
Sorry, we are going to be tapping into those utilities for the stadium. The sanitary that we're taking across, we would be, tapping into that as well.
If memory serves me right, it's about $200,000 more to go farther down,
Yes.
I think you're right.
which we don't have.
Any other facility committee members have comments or questions, thoughts on a couple of the options?
Mr. Perks, this is Jacob.
You're muted, Jacob.
All right, sir. Thank you for allowing me to comment as a citizen. The question I have, I think, is we don't have 100% fidelity of exactly where the stadium is going to sit and where the K5 building is going to sit. They're kind of positioned in an area that is best suited, we think, at this point right now. But left, right, up, down isn't set in stone because we're still waiting for those core samples. Is that correct?
Well, we have not done any core samples until you approve these approximate locations. That's what we really need tonight so that we can continue moving forward and getting more information.
So, what do you mean by approve the approximate in the?
So that the building's not going to move way over here to the west, and we're not going to be moving. We're not going to be like really shifting things around. Like if something moves, the building's not completely done. So like it's going to be tweaked here and there, but we're not going to be moving it 50, 2,000 feet to the west is basically what we want to get approval on these approximate locations, because then we're going to take it to our structural engineers, say, where exactly do you want to get the soil borings? And then that'll be the next thing that we have performed. Once we get that report back, it will tell us a lot more about the soil conditions in those areas, make sure that we're still good to keep it where it is, and there's nothing, screaming at us that we got to move it. I just don't want to do the soil borings and then you want the building moved far out of that area and then we have to redo soil borings again, because that's just going to add costs to your project.
Right. That's kind of what I was looking at, was the opportunity to look at variations of how that building will sit kind of in that general vicinity. Because, turning it around, turning it sideways, having it face differently, is that a huge issue?
Let's see.
It's not from a study perspective, but once you start turning the long ways in the west and east direction, you're taking on a lot of grades. So it becomes problematic with grading and establishing a finished floor, and it's going to require more fill dirt, if you will. So having it kind of run in this direction allows us to work with the land a lot better, if that makes sense.
Yes.
So we came upon this orientation just because the site analysis kind of dictated it, I guess.
So to clarify that, you said you came up with this. I think somebody has another computer on beside someone else, but your site analysis came up with setting up this orientation. Is that what you said?
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
it can be reoriented different ways, but this is probably the most cost-effective, responds to the site the best.
Yeah, I think it's hard to for me to look at that and say that to say I agree to A or B with regards to potential extra uses with that lot without having fidelity on exactly how the building is going to be. Does that make, if we make a decision because of the relativity of the parking lot to the next building that could be built, but the building doesn't actually sit close enough now because it went forward 200 feet. It's not practical for the reason why we said to put it this way. I mean, to me, looking at it, I really like the previous proposals that we were looking at ahead of a long time ago, not with Garmin Miller, but even if the building was turned at an angle, that would allow for that to sit right along the stadium and still fulfill some of the different needs. But that's just a guess. But thank you.
Do you have, and you probably don't, and this sounds ridiculous at this point, just even saying it out loud, but is there an overlay where you have the outline where you would show the optimal location underneath where you have laid this building? Do you see what I'm saying? Where you would have that in frame one, you had where it was the optimal location, where the ground is the optimal elevation. And then you have the second frame where you show where you put the building in that spot. Do you have anywhere where you've put those together where we can see? Because I think
not for today, but we could easily do that.
I think that visually helps to see, because I think the elevation changes are a significant issue here, because all that fill and everything is going to make everything a lot more unstable in the first place. And you don't know how much fill it's going to take Like how much elevation change are we talking about, I guess is my question.
From like the very west property line to the east property line, there's about 30 feet of fall. So if you oriented the building in a east-west direction, north-south as is shown, it would take on probably 8 to 10 feet of grade change going from west to east. And part of the issue too, is that this building needs to be high enough that we can get our storm utilities in and be able to get it down to the detention basin. And then the outlet that goes underneath 201, that's also part of what's driving this as well, is that we need the depth for those pipes. And if you didn't have the depth, then you'd have to go underground with your detention basin, and that's extra cost. And we have all this land that we can do and above, at grade detention basin more cost effectively.
No, for sure. That's a significant run difference. So thank you.
So Rick, I'm going to ask, if we look at diagram 1 and 2 again, do you have a preference? Because you've sent all your kids through here. You are an engineer, and I'd like your opinion on which option you would prefer.
Well, I think 2 makes sense. You are close to both facilities. The stadium and the school, and possibly the future school. And if you need to extend it, I think that it's going to be cheaper to extend that than it is option 1.
Could I ask a question, maybe make a suggestion? This is Kathy from Garmin Miller. If the building locations, the building and the stadium are approximately where everyone feels confident, is it really that difficult to get maybe 1 or 2 more borings and test out both bus lot locations instead of making this, if that's one of the holdups? I'm trying to listen to all this conversation and decide if the bus lot is the holdup or if the actual building locations are. We're trying to put the buildings where your site dictates in the best location possible. I think we could possibly delay the bus lot orientation by just getting 2 more borings in the overall picture of things. That's probably not a decision we need to force you into tonight. Would you say that's fair, Laura?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Does the bus parking lot have to be, does it have to be like a pinwheel like that? I mean, having it horizontal or then pinwheeling it up this way, can it be like this and be shorter? Does it have to be in that shape? I assume that you have all the buses facing one direction.
It's laid out in the most
Correct.
efficient fashion right now, yes.
Okay. I just wondered if there couldn't be two rows of buses rather than just one.
It costs a lot more and takes a lot more circulation than you would imagine, but we can certainly show you something like that in the future. It just works best and most efficiently for cost and everything if it's one single row.
Okay, thank you.
So next steps, Laura, what do have you guys indicated that you would look at an additional couple borings before we have to make a decision? Are we on the same page with that?
So the borings would also be for the building and the stadium as well.
Okay.
So if we do the borings for the stadium and then the building moves 1,000 feet, you know, there would be the cost to do the borings again. So if everybody's comfortable with the location of the building, we can start looking at doing some borings.
Okay, would each of the individual facility committee members indicate if they're comfortable or not, or be willing to indicate if they're comfortable or not?
Yes.
I like the suggestion of a couple more borings. And I'm not crazy about how the way that the elementary school is facing, but if it's the most efficient, most cost efficient method, then I would say yes.
Can I know you're trying to poll and get some answers, but can I just quickly ask the additional cost of the borings as well as potential delays created here? Just curious.
So right now we're working on schematic design. We're working towards that that date is February 25th. So we have a lot of work to do between now and February 25th to get those schematic design documents moving forward. So I certainly can't wait till next month on a decision, just a rough, you know, are we going in the right, you know, path with the site plan? The borings, Kathy, can you help me out? I can't remember how much we had set aside for the borings in the project.
I was afraid you were going to put me on the spot. I don't remember either, but I think just the borings for a parking lot are a lot different cost than for a building because of the difference in depth. So adding a couple for a parking lot, it's not a big deal. But I think what we're trying to avoid is mobilizing a second time, because that is where the cost comes in. If we have to do extras during round one, as much as we can get for the budget that we've already set, I'd say let's do that, but try as hard as we can to avoid a second trip, because that's where we're going to bust the budget.
Okay, thank you.
Cost
I'm okay.
spreadsheet as well.
I'm okay with the approximate location and for the additional borings for a parking lot.
Yes, I'm fine with what has been proposed. I did have one question. If you could pull the diagram back up, Kathy. Or Laura, I'm sorry. Sorry.
I'm trying to pull up the cost spreadsheet real quick. Okay.
Okay.
Found it. So for soil borings, we have $12,000 kind of budgeted right now for the K-5, and then another 5,000 for the football stadium. Yes.
That's just enough to get it done.
Yeah. Sorry,
So
which one?
It doesn't matter. My question is more with the building. I know when I sat in the last educational visioning session, the architect had a couple variations for additional space. If we don't know. Right now, we don't think we're going to add on to this building, but my only concern with this proposed plan is it's really close to Agenbrod. Where would we potentially add additional space if we wanted to?
So we were talking about only having up to 1,000 students in this building. And I know you have a couple extra classrooms right now today. So that's a couple of them if you were to like completely fill those all out. So then we were looking at basically, I think 2 to 4 classroom addition on the north side. That still gets it. We still have room. You can barely make out the dashed lines on here. But we do have that designed in that we would have space for that there. And then over here on this side, we have room for another 2 classrooms. And that gets you to your 1,000 students max that you said you would have in this building before you would build another building.
So if we went, let's say we had to add 400 students, and like I said, right now we think we're going to do a separate building. If we had to do that, there would not be space in this plan to do a 400 student addition.
Oh, you still could. You still could. You might have to move the drive, round that out a little bit further around one of the wings. And you could always add on to one of these other pods. We just don't have that in right now for the mechanical spaces. So at that point, you would be building a new mechanical space, new restrooms to go along with those spaces.
Okay, I wanted to make sure, and I think it's because the design flipped. So previously there was space to add a whole nother wing here, and that's gone because of how the design flipped. As long as there's a way, like I said, right now we don't think that's the direction we've gone, but I've learned in my several years on the board, never say never. So I'm fine. Like I said, I just want to make sure if we need to add additional space beyond the 1,000 students, that there is somewhere we can do that without exorbitant cost.
Yeah, right now you're not locked in really anywhere except for like where that bus lot would be, but still that can be moved as well.
Any other opinions from facility committee members on the borings?
Justin, this is Jacob. Can you hear me?
Yes.
One of the things I would ask is, what are the potential layouts that we could see from the building? A couple of different ways that, even though they're in that space, is seeing how it could be laid out. So then we would have a more concrete answer for where we really wanted the soil borings to be done. Just a thought.
So I can answer a little bit more on that. So we were waiting on a decision we were looking at the storm shelter and how to possibly, from the last facilities committee meeting, it was suggested that we look at possibly reducing some square footage so that a storm shelter could be provided. Justin and I were looking through the program. We looked at providing possibly a hardened space. So you would still have the student and occupant safety during a tornado, but you wouldn't necessarily have those other things that the ICC requires, like the water storage, having a generator, those the kind of things. But still you would have the safety area for the occupants. And so then we looked at reducing square footage. So now that we've looked at reducing the square footage and getting a program of requirement, which is still, which I sent to Justin. So if the program of requirement is acceptable, we will now start going back through and looking at modifying those spaces from the educational visioning session that we had. From the educational visioning session, it was talked about having pods. So we're not going to go, way out there with the designs, because in listening to the educational visioning, the pod layout is what they were looking for. But we will be modifying the floor plan if the program is approved. We'll continue moving forward on the design of that.
Any other facility committee members?
Yeah, this is Rick. I'm okay with that layout. If you rotate the school, then the parking lot moves, you run into the detention pond. I can see all kinds of issues. Cut and fills is really expensive.
Lori, Julie?
I think for me, I would still stand by, no, I don't think it's, I don't think that we've gone through the process properly. This is a decision that will affect this campus for the next 100 years. I think saying that water and sewer to move it back at $200,000 on a $29 million project is insane, that we couldn't find $200,000 if that was the right thing to
It's
do.
not in the budget.
Not-
And I don't know how many times I have to say, you have $28.5 million. 200, that ain't
We
in the
just went over
budget.
that in December. We just
All right.
put more money in
It's not in it. There's not money. You're maxed. After the meeting today that you were in, I said we're maxed. We have nothing else to discuss. You want to do more, fine. Ask the next treasurer to find it. I'm telling you right now, there's no more money. And I'm tired of repeating myself on that with you.
Okay, but there could be.
There isn't.
Brennan, let me finish. There could be a compromise elsewhere.
He did. He compromised. They lowered the square footage so you could have hardened things. He asked that from Jacob. They did that. They compromised on that. And here we're still bickering about it.
Okay, so my final thought is I'm still wondering about the community forums as well. We've not included the community in this decision.
Lori, do you have any thoughts?
I think we need to make a decision. I think to get the early site package out in May is going to be the biggest cost savings we can do. I will reiterate what the architect said in November, December. If we can get this started, we will save money over the cost of the project to the tune of 8%. That's a lot of money, not to mention the deadlines. We need this space in a couple more years, 2 years. We don't have the luxury of having 3 or 4 years to build it. So I am good with this. It may not be perfect, but I trust the architects. I trust Garmin Miller, and I think this has been thought through. This is not a surprise. So let's go for it.
Anyone else you need to hear from, Justin?
No, that should be it.
Okay, I can go on to the next slide real quick then.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, maybe not. My computer just locked up. So to show everybody, if you haven't already seen it, this is the latest version of the football stadium from the meeting that we had in December. It was asked to orient the entrance to the southeast, and so then also having an entrance to the northeast from the bus lot area, where you could have an ambulance come onto the field, come into the stadium, or your players coming in from that north side. And then we've got the locker rooms, training room, restroom on the south end with a ticket booth as well. So then we've got a large grand entry as well from that end. Let's see.
Can I fill in some gaps as well?
Yeah.
Real quick? And I'll make this to the point and relatively brief. We put together, and this is, I guess, for transparency's sake, we put together a committee for the athletic facility made up of a few members, a couple of board members, Mr. Elo and Mrs. Mansfield. We had our athletic director on there, Mr. Smith. Mr. Bird was on there as maintenance. Myself as superintendent, also Mr. Hattery served. Garmin Miller actually proposed 4 different renderings. After our discussions here in the media center, we collectively, the group, kind of met after the meeting and talked a little bit about the cost of having potential 2 buildings, the location of where we thought the majority of people were going to be parking, which was our high school lot, but also having like an entranceway, walkway for buses and student athletes and coaches to the north as well. And so we actually went back to Garmin Miller and were able to kind of provide the site layout as you see now. And Garmin Miller was great as far as working with us and getting us back a design that definitely talked about what we wanted as far as the building, one single building being located on the east side with a ticket booth attached to save costs, and then having a nice entryway up from the lot through the wooded area, but also providing a separate entranceway for our buses, visitors, and officials that will park probably in that school lot, while also having our home side with the sun at their back and the visitors with the sun in their face. Thanks, Lauren.
Sure. So next steps then, we're going to continue developing the floor plans. We're going to start taking that 2D image and start bringing it up, start looking at some elevations. We're going to continue working on the site plan, get those soil borings, get the locations for those as well, and work towards that schematic design submission on February 25th. Once we submit the schematic design documents, then we will, Peterson's going to then do an estimate for the project, where we can start taking a look at that, make sure that we're on budget, and move forward. That's all I have.
Okay, great. Next, in future steps, as we continue to get in the design, we're going to take a look at the updates to 201. Also take a look at additional features that could be on the building as far as roof, et cetera. Brennan, do we have a hearing of the public at all?
I do not see anything.
We haven't scheduled meetings yet, so how are we going to announce it? Is it we plan on having the same?
You can do the next one because it's on your agenda.
I'm saying the next facilities meeting, don't we set those in the regular board meeting?
No.
But we're going to make the night of the board meeting.
Right.
We
He
set
can,
those dates.
okay, I mean,
I mean,
I
are we
don't-
anticipating it's going to be the same?
I would imagine the business meeting is gonna be the same.
Okay.
Yeah,
So what's that date again?
it'll be February 8th.
Okay, February 8th at 6:00 p.m. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
I'll move.
Mr. Elam,
I'll second.
Mr. Hattery, Ms. Reese, can you please call the roll?
Rick Gilbert,
Yes.
Justin Burke,
Yes.
Brennan Henry,
Yeah.
Danny Elam,
Yes.
Lori Sebastian,
Yes.
Julie Reese, yes.